Hello, everyone. I just reacted to some Reddit comments I got pissed off about. Probably were bots, but anyway, I'm going to be. I don't know why I have these in. Oh yeah, I'm going to be listening
using
to
the
video
videos at academyofideas.com.
Played it. It's going to be somebody who is a Catholic. Here, I'll just show you. This is a Catholic YouTuber I used to watch. I watched some of his videos. I wasn't like a fan or anything. But talking about the deconstruction, the dishonesty of deconstruction from faith. And he's pointing an arrow to them. Are they being honest? Well, obviously he doesn't think so. He's basically saying these people are being dishonest in their deconstruction from faith. So what makes him say that? Well, I actually listened to Rhett's deconstruction story on Alex O'Connor's podcast, and it was literally just him telling his story. He wasn't making any truth claims. He was telling a story of how he left the faith and the things he discovered scientifically about evolution and just not wanting to believe in Christianity anymore. So I don't know how he can be dishonest about him just talking about his personal experience, but I guess we'll watch the video and find out what this Catholic gentleman is claiming.
As someone who has traversed the experience of conversion from vaguely undefined agnosticism to eventually Catholicism, I can verify that people love a good conversion story. Whenever I'm introduced to someone or invited to speak somewhere or be interviewed by someone, that's almost always the thing that they want to hear about. Which is probably why conversion stories away from Christianity, or what is commonly called deconstruction, can be so aggravating and abrasive to people of faith. But as someone who does this kind of work, what you might call an evangelist or an apologist, I've tried to listen to those kinds of stories intently, not to mention the times I've spent one-on-one with people I know going through that experience. And what I found especially interesting about people who specifically use the phrase, "I deconstructed," is that they're not describing themselves as someone whose interest in their religious practice just faded away, or they simply became spiritually lethargic and turned around one day and realized they couldn't claim to be a Christian anymore. Instead,
Well, I think, at least in my experience, it was finding a lot of holes in the faith and a lot of problems and toxic ideas and beliefs and patterns that add up to the point where you just don't want to be a part of it anymore. Even though obviously it's hard for anyone who deconstructs from the faith, who cared about their faith in any sense. Obviously, it's hard for them, and nobody wants to do it. Nobody wants to leave the good things behind from their faith. Nobody wants to leave a universal system of meaning, but people do it because it has major problems for them that they just can't reconcile. And the only reason and the only way people can do it is from a position, kind of as Rhett says, is a position of privilege, which there's nothing wrong with being in a position of privilege. That's a good thing. I know in the modern day we talk about that like it's like it means you're evil or lesser or something, but no, being in a position of privilege is a good thing. Abuse of privilege is not, obviously, but anyway, but what that means is that people are in a mental state where they are mentally stable enough where they have enough support around them, in my case it was therapy, that they actually are mentally capable of reassessing what they believe to be the truth in a way that they think is better. So I'll play this. It's a little low for me. Hold on.
Listen to those stories where I spend time with people going through that experience one-on-one. They almost always claim that this was a rational process of inquiry. They're saying that they encountered some argument or evidence that called into question the plausibility of the doctrines of their Christianity.
Usually more than one argument.
Or some other faith tradition. And the more they explored, the more that house of cards became vulnerable to the weight of all the alternative arguments. And you don't have to look far to hear these kinds of testimonies. They're all over the place on YouTube and elsewhere. But it usually follows a pattern something like this. I encountered an argument against theism or against Christianity that I couldn't answer. And the more I looked into it, the more I was convinced by it. And unanimously, they always appeal to reason as their motivation. If you ask them why they lost their faith, the reply is always in the form of an argument against Christianity. They always frame themselves as like tireless seekers of truth who couldn't in good conscience remain Christian in the face of what appears to be overwhelming evidence to the contrary. And I don't want to
Let's see what he says.
Say that nobody legitimately has a crisis of faith brought on by some intellectual struggle. I've known some people who have gone down this path and their explanations were robust and worth considering. But
are you about to say that most people do this because, if not because of reason, then what's the reason you're going to say that they decide to leave their religion?
But a lot, perhaps even most, of what I've seen and heard in these testimonies is a massive inconsistency. Because there are a lot of things we do in this life, things of consequence even, that we couldn't defend rationally, and yet we just carry on doing them. Like,
is this person about to say that this person is dismissing all rational arguments against the faith as being valid reasons for deconstruction because we do things that we can't rationally explain? And that people are being dishonest because of that?
there are extremely compelling and persuasive philosophical arguments against the political party you support. Arguments I'm willing to bet most people could not defend themselves against. But those same people will still go on supporting those parties and their policies. There are compelling and popular arguments out there these days against...
Wait, what is he saying? Is he saying that he talks to people in different political parties with... He knows he's exactly right, and he gives arguments that are flawless, and they can't defend themselves against them. But at the same time, they call themselves rational people. They call themselves people who did this thing for a reason. Did it occur to you that maybe they are more knowledgeable about one thing than the other, or they care more about one thing than the other? Like, they care about their faith more than politics and the kind of universal truths more than political ones? Just because they lose to you in an argument about politics doesn't mean that they're not rational people and can't make their own decisions about what religion they want to be in or not be in.
Arguments against the political party you support. Arguments I'm willing to bet most people could not defend themselves against. But those same people will still go on supporting those parties and their policies. There are compelling and popular arguments out there these days against the idea of getting married. You'll hear people decry how risky it is to get married to someone during a swell of intoxicating hormones and infatuation spurred on by young age and inexperience, even though there's a high percentage of failure, even though the consequences of failure can be psychologically and economically catastrophic. And yet you could present these arguments to a young couple who may have no answer to any of the points you make, and would any of us be surprised if they still proceeded with their wedding?
Okay, so people can do things without having logical explanations for them. I don't think that means it's arbitrary. There's probably some reasoning behind why they do it, like they see that the pros outweigh the cons, and it's not exactly a foolproof argument against marriage. There are a lot of successful marriages as well.
I can think of philosophers like Bertrand Russell, who argues against marriage itself as an institution in his book Marriage and Morals, and I bet you could pose those kinds of arguments to happily married couples who would be helpless to reply with arguments of their own, but wouldn't for a second be persuaded to end their marriage as a result because they're happy. There are arguments for like veganism and vegetarianism from philosophers like Peter.
Okay, but not everyone is willing to stay in a religion because, look, like, not everyone is happy in religion. That's why people leave, is because they're often unhappy with what the religion teaches. Why else would they leave?
Peter Singer that I expect most people would be unable to answer again. And yet, in spite of the apparent indefensibility of their habit of eating meat, they will just carry on doing so. What about something like your job? What if like a highly analytic person examined your personality, your history, and your career path and convincingly argued that it was not the right career for you? Maybe some people would respond to that by making a change, but I bet most people would ignore the arguments and just go back to their job the very next day.
So you're telling me somebody could argue against me that my career path wasn't the best, and I can either choose to ignore it or keep going my career. And you're saying most people, if somebody came up to another person and argued to them why they should change their career, you're saying most people wouldn't end up changing their career because some random fucking guy came up to them and told them they were in the wrong career? Yeah, I mean, that's kind of fucking obvious. I don't know what.
Or we could talk about the morality of self-sacrifice in the service of others. There's actually no rational basis for that moral doctrine. There's no logical reason why a person should make sacrifices for someone else with no reciprocal benefit. And yet...
Yeah, but I don't think there's really an instance where there's self-sacrifice with no reciprocal benefit. And if that's the case, then it probably isn't worth doing. Like, not even Jesus did self-sacrifice with no benefit towards him. He did it because he was obeying his Father's will, and because he would get him exalted to heaven, and because it would, cause his believers to, whatever, to believe in the theology he wanted them to believe in. But what did he say again?
A person should make sacrifices for someone else with no reciprocal benefit. And
no, things don't happen in a void. There's always going to be reciprocal reasons why you sacrifice yourself. If you actually do sacrifice yourself with no reciprocal reason of benefit towards you, then you are just like fucking insane. Because Christians don't self-sacrifice for no reciprocal benefit. That's bullshit. Even though the Bible says like, oh yeah, just do these things because of like love and stuff like that. People do these things, yes, because of love. They'll receive love back, but also because they know that God wants them to do it. So they're getting benefited by doing the right thing and by following God. That's not no benefit towards them. If it was no benefit towards them, that's what a Christian might describe sin as. It's something that has no benefit towards you because it's not going to help you in the long run. Whereas Christians self-sacrifice because they believe it's helpful in the long run.
Yet,
even though it's painful for them to do in the present, nobody does. Otherwise, it wouldn't really be self-sacrifice. If you're enjoy doing that kind of stuff, like if you're a sadist, that's not the kind of self-sacrifice that Christians are talking about. So, no, there's no unreciprocal self-sacrifice. Not even Jesus did that.
Almost everyone will give at least lip service to this belief. In reality, religious revelation, and most especially the teachings and enduring influence of Jesus Christ, are the reason why we hold fast to this belief. But if you put that under serious philosophical scrutiny, like someone like Friedrich Nietzsche did, you find virtually no rational foundation for this behavior or belief other than appeals to God. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that arguments against marriage or eating meat and staying in your career are unanswerable. I'm just saying that most people are not equipped to answer the likes of a Bertrand Russell or a Peter Singer on these kinds of questions, and will nonetheless carry on living the lives that committed to a pattern that stands in contrast to arguments that they themselves can't answer. So what is my point in all of this? My point is that very little of what we do is based on an unassailable commitment to the dictates of reason. And in fact, I think that's actually a problem. I think most of our lives should be governed by reason, but the reality is most of us do not submit to the high seat of reason, even when arguments that we can't answer are...
Alright, so you're differentiating between the high seat of reason and reason in general. People generally don't do things that are unreasonable. That's why we have the word unreasonable, to point out those things. I would say you're saying that most people don't act out of reason, but that's just not true. I mean, like, just because we're not consciously, logically mapping everything out, like logically solving everything we do to the highest point doesn't mean we're not acting within reason. You're acting within reason if you're acting within the natural mandates of your body, in accordance with, like, society. If you're acting within reason, if you're doing what's good for yourself in reality, and like not harming others. But yeah, I just don't agree with the claim that most people don't act out of reason. I don't think that's true. I think you're twisting the word reason into something that is where people have to logically go step by step through the meanings to, like, the highest thing. I just don't get what you're saying.
Offered to us, which is why when people who have abandoned the practice of their religion give arguments as their sole motivation for this change of direction in their lives, I can't help but think like there's some dishonesty at play here. Because again, if someone offered them the same arguments for why eating meat was wrong or why monogamy is...
Okay. Yes. Obviously, it's not just logical. That's not the only aspect to why people leave the faith. Obviously, there's an emotional aspect to it, okay? People are hurt by teachings. People feel sad because of these teachings, of the things they imply, like God's order to commit genocide. That makes people feel sad. People feel that there's something deeply wrong with the way Catholicism or Christianity or whatever teaches you to suppress yourself, to debase yourself, to suppress your sexuality, to view yourself as not essentially good, or as somebody who's flawed in terms of, in essence, like you have concupiscence, you're wounded, you're broken. That's a big term I hear, is that you're broken. So people not wanting to believe in this thing, yeah, I'd say there's definitely the emotional aspect where they might not have a logical reason, but just hearing these kind of things makes them feel like uneasy. And that's a gut feeling, maybe. And gut feelings are usually pretty trustworthy. Like in therapy, they tell you, if your gut's telling you that something's not right, then you should probably listen to it, because we have millions of years of evolution that helps us to attune to these things. I'm not saying you should always listen to your gut, but generally, yeah, your emotions are signs of something. And so emotions obviously interplay with logic here, but you shouldn't call someone dishonest just because they don't make this decision to leave religion without any emotion at all.
Unnatural, or a whole range of other moral considerations that they couldn't answer themselves, I bet it would have little standing or influence in their lifestyle choices. So why is there this double standard with God and religion? Again, remember, if you say, I couldn't answer this argument for atheism, or I couldn't answer this argument against the Trinity or the resurrection of Jesus, fine. But you can't also answer arguments against all kinds of things you're currently doing and you aren't paying any attention to. Just this one that gives you a...
Okay, but now you're just assuming that the people who deconstruct, like, don't know what they're talking about. It's not that these people don't know about the... Now you're talking about people who don't know about, like, the doctrine of the Trinity, who don't understand it. But people who deconstruct, we're talking about people who look into these things. They research them, they go deeper into them. And then they use logic to determine, okay, that doesn't make sense. And usually it is like a moral thing. Like, how can a loving God send the beings he created into hell for eternity for committing like a single sin or something like that?
Reason to abandon the practice of your religion. What I find particularly interesting is when I've had conversations with people in this position and I ask them if they've gone out looking for refutations to their dilemmas, and they always claim that they couldn't find any satisfying answers out there. But here's the problem with that. We all have a limitation on what degree of complexity of argument we can negotiate.
So, yes, sometimes, like, you're just not going to find an answer to things. Like, you're not going to find out, okay, if you want to look at it from an agnostic point of view, is there a God? There's no scientific thing. Like, okay, whatever. People will say there's scientific evidence for God, but there are things that we just don't know. I forget what the fuck I was talking about.
Any satisfying answers out there. But here's the problem with that.
Oh, yeah. So most people don't just leave religion because they don't understand or they don't find a satisfying answer. The things they can't find an answer to is like, why did God command these like children to be killed? Because of they were in this tribe. And the reason that Christianity would give is, oh, they were sinful people. But that's not just saying, oh, well, we can't really find a satisfying answer for that. We have an answer for that. That answer is just fucking disgusting. And it clearly shows that something is wrong with this Christian God.
We all have a limitation on what degree of complexity of argument we can negotiate. Let me say it a different way. There are arguments out there for and against our religious beliefs that are more sophisticated than our ability to understand. For example, if someone said to me, I encountered this particular argument against the existence of God, and now I can no longer believe in him. What if I said to that person, okay, well, what about something like Kurt Gödel's ontological argument? Have you explored that? Did you not find that convincing? I think they'd have two options in the face of something like that. They could say,
okay, by the way, the same argument could be applied to you, okay? You don't fucking know. Like, somebody could bring up some random-ass atheist argument, the Dick Schmoiger argument, okay, against the existence of God. So, by the way, whatever you're saying now, the same thing can be applied to you.
Yeah, I wasn't convinced by it. Or they could say, actually, I didn't understand it. In the former scenario, they'd be making a claim that arguably the greatest logician of the 20th century, who was convinced by the logic of this argument, an argument which, when formalized for computational verification, was found to be perfectly logically sound, but that you've somehow managed to detect its flaws. You who don't even know how to submit your taxes at the end of the year without making...
Jesus Christ, the amount of assumption this man is doing about this. Like, first of all, what the fuck you mean? You who can't even do your taxes at the end of the year. Look at this fucking attitude of arrogance and like looking down at people. Also, what he's talking about, like this single logical argument, okay, maybe that logical argument's true. Maybe the person was wrong on that point. Okay, that's one single point. Most people don't deconstruct because of that specific reason that you're talking about. Like, fine, if it's logically sound, fine, but that's not the reason. Like, even people who say like they don't believe in God, that's not really the reason they deconstruct. It's more on moral grounds. And then Catholic Christians will say, well, you don't have any morality to base off of. You know, you don't have objective morality. And I would say we do have morality built into us through nature. And I think we do have logic and a sense of justice. What I'm arguing against is not that. And I'm not arguing against an objective sense of justice. I'm arguing against the Christian God. And that's what this man is talking about. That's what people who are deconstructing are talking about. But he's giving this generic reason just for like people against God in general.
Mistakes. And I guarantee you're going to get somebody in the comments on this video who goes, actually, Gödel's ontological argument relies on axioms that are unproven, because they read that in a Wikipedia article somewhere. Any honest...
Dude, the amount of fucking arrogance this guy has, just saying like, oh yeah, people are going to criticize what I said in the comments because of something they read on Wikipedia. Like these amateurs, they don't know how to do proper research, and they're going to point out flaws or holes in this argument. But you know what? They're just... what is he going to even say?
Normal person encountering that argument has to admit they've met the limits of their own logical processing capability.
dude, you're not even going to address the problem that you yourself brought up with the argument that it's founded on unproven axioms. Like, you just punched a hole in your own fucking argument.
And this is true of any subject. There are people who are specialized and smarter than you who are arguing for and against something you are convinced by. It isn't the case that there are no answers for your logical complaints. It's that you and I aren't capable of understanding all of the answers that are out there. So in that...
Okay, but I thought when you said we're not capable of understanding, you were talking about humanity in general. Like, humanity can't understand these issues. But now it seems like you're saying we have the answers by people who are smarter than us, but we're just not looking at them because they're above our intellects.
Scenario for the people who claim to have deconstructed, is it true that they've managed to find the exact optimized reply to their arguments, the one that sits right at the summit of their threshold of their own rational ability, and found that those arguments did not satisfy the challenges that they've set against their religion?
Same to
because
you.
if I had to put money down on it, I'd bet that the answer to that question is almost unanimously no. And even if they could honestly say yes, for the sake of their own integrity and internal consistency, if reason really does rule their lives, then I expect they'll be scrutinizing all of their lifestyle choices with the same level of rational skepticism.
What? You're saying that in order for people to be honest, you have to be like a fucking insane person and scrutinize every single part of your life with this rational lens? You're saying that's the only way they can be honest in deconstructing, is if there are these super rational people who scrutinize everything, look at everything under the eyes of rationality. If not, then they're just being dishonest. Like, dude, do you do that? Do you look at every single aspect of your life within like logical rationality? And if you do, okay, fine. And I can see now that's why you're making the assumption that most people don't, right? Most people don't do what you do. Most people don't, live their life scrutinizing everything they do under logical lens, which one of the examples you point out, you just poked a hole in your own fucking thing, even though you just admitted that there are things above our intellect. So you're saying that these things are ultimately above our intellect, but at the same time you're saying that if you want to be honest, you have to rationally go through and analyze everything you do. That makes real fucking sense.
Or maybe that's just not how people live, which is why I find these rational accounts of religious deconstruction to be extremely suspicious whenever I hear them. In reality,
I don't know if he's going to address this, but what the fuck? The same thing can be applied to someone converting into the religion.
Base our behaviors.
Like, if you're going to say this kind of thing, oh, I had a religious experience where, I was converted to Christianity. I found it to be true. Jesus actually appeared to me. Oh, okay, that's really interesting. But did you consider the Dick Schmager argument? Oh, really? You haven't looked into every single fucking possible outcome? Oh, you must not really be honest in your conversion. It seems a little suspicious to me. But don't bother looking into that anyway, because it's above your intelligence.
And our decisions on a whole range of motives that include our passions, our commitments, our loyalties, our compulsions, and as often as not, just what we want to do. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that we should ignore logical difficulties or apparent rational inconsistencies in our beliefs.
Yes, at the end of the day, people are going to do what they want to do, because you can't control what you want, because you can't control what you want to want. Okay? It's just the way it is.
Absolutely should scrutinize those and try to make sense of them. But when people
you either do it because you want to or because you're forced to. And I think with religion, I think the people who were in and wanted to deconstruct but didn't have the strength to, they're actually stuck in religion because they're forced to be there, not because they want to be there. And the people who were able to successfully deconstruct are there because they want to be there.
Say, I heard this argument and nobody out there had an answer for it. That just reeks of dishonesty to me. I guarantee there's an answer out there that is offered by someone
That is a bullshit claim, and that is just so ungrounded in logic You're just assuming ill intent, and that's what a lot of Christians do, is they assume ill intent of people, because that's the way Christianity teaches people to be, is to be suspicious of anyone who's not Christian. That's what the scriptures do. That's what the whole fucking scriptures are about. The Old Testament, all those Old Testament laws talking about don't intermix the cloths, don't intermix the don't eat pork, don't eat these certain foods, all these strict laws, don't intermarry with the pagan nations, with the Gentile nations. It's all about separating Israel, and this same kind of like superior separation mindset comes to Christianity. You know, it says don't belong to the world. The world, the flesh, and the devil are your enemies, and people will associate that. What Christians will do is they will label anyone who's not Christian, practicing explicitly Christian lifestyle. They are part of the world, and the world is in nature evil according to Christian scripture, according to Christian doctrine and scripture. And the way they define world, though, isn't just like material world. Otherwise, that would be whatever the fuck Augustine believed, that like all material stuff was evil. What they say by the world would be the world that of people that don't believe in the faith, the unbelievers, the pagans, the heretics, what they would call the sinful world. And I know some people have different interpretations of that, like, oh, the sinful world is just the places that are populated by sin, but like the strip clubs or whatever. But there is a big attitude in Christianity where they just are very suspicious of other people. They're insecure about their own faith being undermined or being driven to temptation because they have these urges they're suppressing, and seeing people who aren't doing that is a temptation for them, because they probably know deep down that it's natural to do, but they're too afraid to have to contradict anything in their belief system. That's another thing about Christianity, is that you have to believe every single thing. Like what I was talking about in my last video about Catholicism, you have to believe every single thing that they teach. I swear to God, every single thing they teach, or you are a heretic. And if you're a heretic, okay, and they put all this confusing fucking terminology around it, if you're a heretic, you're going to hell.
Lot smarter than the person making that claim, and the fact they haven't done the homework necessary to find it suggests to me
you are talking such vague fucking terms, and you're not giving any specific examples about problems you have with what people were talking about. If you're gonna call these people out, if you're gonna put these people's faces in your thumbnail, have a big arrow pointing to them, and have your video title say these people are being dishonest, okay, you fucking calling them out like that, you better fucking address the actual claims they're making, instead of making these broad, useless claims.
That this has as much to do with something like, I don't know, laziness or emotional desire than it does with reason. Because at the end of the day, the Christian religion is not easy to practice. It makes demands on every aspect.
They're being lazy or emotional. I mean, obviously it's their moral failing, right? That's the only reasonable explanation. I mean, it's not like they could logically reason their way out of Christianity. That's impossible, because Christianity is true. It's impossible that there could be anything logically wrong with Christianity, right? So the only explanation, of course, is that it has to be laziness. And the reason this guy has to fucking go through these lengths is because if he doesn't, he's threatened with eternal hell. That's right. If he doesn't believe this, if he doesn't believe every single thing that they teach, he is going to go to hell for eternity. So that's why he has to fucking desperately claw at this claim that they're just morally, it's a moral issue, right? There's something that is corrupt within their souls that is causing them to do this. It's laziness or it's emotion. Emotion does have part of it. I don't think there's something wrong with that. You yourself were saying that most people don't do things because of just logically reasoning things out. And I'm sure a lot of people become Christian in part due to emotion, rather than logically figuring out every single claim for the existence of God.
Of our lives, it requires us to be constantly moving forward in faith and the willingness to examine our lives and repent of our failures every day.
Dude, yeah, I think what you're talking about is it encourages you to be scrupulous and analyze every fucking thing for how rational it is, and to debase yourself every time you make a mistake and blame it on you being fundamentally broken and dependent on God. And so you're just going to keep going through this cycle of debasing yourself and, glorifying the good Lord who loves you and wants you to hate yourself.
And some people just don't have the stamina to do that. Some people aren't willing to continually confront the skeletons in their closets and the dark recesses of their personality.
Oh my God. Yes. Yes. Rhett, he's unwilling to confront the skeletons in his closet, the dark recesses of his personality. He's not doing the shadow work. He's not confronting his shadow self. He's not, dude, this guy's making references to skeletons in this guy's fucking closet. Like, he's basically calling him out and saying, these people, they're just like, they've got these skeletons in their closet. They're morally corrupt. They've done these terrible things, and they're just unwilling to confront that. And that's the reason why they left. Not because not because of, other, like, real reasons.
People don't like being ultimately accountable to God as their judge and would rather pretend like he doesn't exist. So when an apparent lifeline in the form of a seemingly reasonable argument
I wonder why people don't want to be accountable to a God that is extremely hypocritical and is an asshole consistently in the Old Testament and contradicts himself and his own mandate to love and is kind of like a genocidal, narcissistic, really narcissistic, maniac.
appears, they latch onto it. So if that's wrong, and I'd argue it is, what should we do when we encounter difficult arguments against our beliefs? Well, I'd say we need to exercise humility by admitting that our reason isn't always up to the task of solving the most difficult questions of the nature of something like ultimate reality, which is what we mean by God. And though there are compelling arguments against your beliefs, there are also compelling
That's interesting. Ultimate reality, which is God. That's a very interesting thing. I'm not criticizing what he's saying, but it's interesting because that is the Christian belief. It's kind of like the way they believe that the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit are one God, even though they're three beings. They believe that God is reality, but also a person at the same time. It's interesting.
arguments for it. So if you're going to live your life motivated by your reason, you're going to need to do your homework. But you also need to follow your moral intuition.
So you're claiming that people need to follow their life by moral intuition. Like just doing things without logically analyzing it is not what people should do. People should logically analyze it. And now he's gonna make the moral call, okay? That from his high tower, he's gonna make the moral call down to those sinners who have abandoned their faith. They need to take moral responsibility.
And your conscience. Again, in all other areas of life, there might be...
Yeah, and this guy, he knows how to, logical arguments, they're not above him. They're above most people, not above him. But you know what? What's also not above him is reading into people's minds. And he knows what people's consciousness are saying. How does he know that? Well, of course, the Catechism of the Catholic Church and the Scriptures, they give him insight into the human consciousness, and he knows what the human consciousness is, and he knows that human consciousness follows exactly the Catechism of the Catholic Church. It's actually wired into our brains. Is that it follows all of the moral, natural laws that Christianity claims. And he just knows this because he's done his homework, but other people haven't done their homework.
Moral arguments that you can't answer that claim that something like marriage and monogamy are incompatible with human flourishing. But unless you're looking for an excuse to do so, nobody's going to go out and divorce.
I don't think most people are going to make a claim against that. I think most people just have monogamous relationships because they just see it works. And you don't need to rationally deconstruct something if it doesn't seem to provide any benefit.
Their spouse over that. Why? Because they know that's wrong. They don't have to solve the intellectual riddle. Their conscience is screaming the answer at them. We should have a similar resolve when it comes to our faith and our religion. And if we're willing to admit to solve the intellectual riddle, their conscience is screaming the answer at them. We should have a similar resolve when it comes to our faith and our religion. And if we're willing to admit logical arguments, we have to be ready to admit
we should have the same resolve. Okay. Dude, from your point of view, okay.
Evidence of that court of judgment.
Of course, from your point of view, you'd say that, because all you're trying to fucking do is convert people to your faith.
And that can be something like a lifetime inquiry, which is how I would characterize my own relationship between...
Yeah, a lifetime of basically trying to logically analyze everything and fit that into the teachings of the church. Have fun with that.
In faith and reason, I'm constantly studying, constantly learning, constantly evaluating. When I feel like my understanding is failing, or
he's basically like, this whole fucking video summed up is like, I'm better than you, is what he's saying about those people. I analyze my conscience. I follow my conscience. I don't have skeletons in my closet. No, I'm actually willing to clean them out of my closet. I'm actually willing to do my homework. These people aren't willing to do that. They're not willing to look into the facts. That's what this whole video is. He said nothing of substance. He's just said a bunch of bullshit.
or under strain, I give it some time and do some more study. And in my experience, I've always found satisfying answers.
It's basically just saying that they're dirty sinners. Like, that's exactly what Rhett was kind of talking about, where he's he didn't mention this kind of reaction to his deconstruction specifically, I don't think, but just he mentioned how he has this part of his mind that's still like the evangelical or whatever, the Christian part that is just judging him based on what he does. And I think this is a pretty good representation of that voice that Christians have in their head after they leave. It's just this voice that doesn't address any of their claims directly, but is willing to essentially judge them as people. That's what this guy is doing. He's judging them. He's judging their souls. He's saying they are not willing to face the truth. They have skeletons in their closet that they're not cleaning out. But I am. And it's just kind of disgusting to see. It's just calling these people out and calling them dishonest, not addressing any of their claims, and at the same time putting himself on a moral pedestal.
Because I'm looking for them. I also have, on top of that, a huge inventory of evidence from my own experience confirming that God is real. God answers my prayers. God has performed miracles in my life and in those that I love. And God has given me graces that have healed serious defects in my own personality that I know I can't take credit for. All of those kinds of considerations need to be weighed in the balance. So if you find...
So weigh your personal experiences, but they shouldn't weigh their personal experiences as much. Like, dude, your word is just as good as theirs. Why are you elevating your own experience above theirs?
Yourself on the path of deconstruction. First, ask yourself if you're being consistent. Just like you wouldn't suddenly stop eating meat or honoring your marriage, a mere argument against your religion shouldn't be enough to derail your position within the church. At least not.
If my wife was beating me all the time and constantly making me feel like shit, and if my wife was a narcissist and a sociopath, which I think it can be, I think that God is a narcissist and a sociopath, as described in the Bible, and is making me miserable, then yes, I would leave my wife.
Not without some serious effort on your part to rescue it. Okay, thanks for watching. These videos and this channel are...
So it's always the call, like, oh, you need to put some serious effort in. Dude, I'm so fucking tired of this bullshit. Like, trying to make people feel guilty. That's all he's doing. He's tugging on people's guilt strings. And he's manipulative. these.
Only possible because of viewer support. So if you can spare some help, please consider making a contribution through my website at brianholdsworth.ca or join my locals community at brianholdsworth.locals.com.
Joke of a video calling those people out. Just this guy probably didn't even fucking listen to their deconstruction stories, and he's willing to defame other people and criticize them and judge them in front of others just to probably bolster his own faith. You know what? I don't want to make that claim because I don't want to go down to that level and be a hypocrite. I won't assume his intentions. However, the things he did say were stupid and judgmental of others and just plain wrong, and just serves to increase judgment and lessen understanding, I think. So that's all I've got to say about that. I hope that I don't know, I just hate seeing this kind of thing because it's these kind of people who judge others and bring shame upon others for no good reason. And you know what? I really... This kind of shame is very hurtful for people who aren't in that religion, or people who are in the religion too, because it just increases fear about leaving, and the penalty for leaving is already excommunication, which means you go to hell automatically unless the bishop I forget what it's called. The bishop has to bring you back into the church. Anyway, just another example of toxic Christianity.